Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Tales from the Road, Volume 7, Story 1. I'm sick to death of working myself to death. I took the first vacation of my life last year. A beat-up rebuilt Yamaha Zuma and a foolish sense of optimism carried me across the western United States, an adventure that seriously made me rethink everything I thought I knew about the world. I love Seattle, with the hip original hippie neighborhoods and the perma-carnival atmosphere of Pike Place Market. The bridge troll was a highlight. Gotta love a city that sees a bridge and goes, you know what this needs? A giant concrete troll. Getting out of Seattle, however, was a total nightmare. Restricted to back roads by a motor that capped at 40 miles an hour, I must have gotten lost a dozen times despite all the help I received from baffled gas station attendants. So I was behind schedule when it came to finding my campsite. Some miles south and a little east of the city, there's a free campground. It's most often used by horse riders, and boy, can you smell it. That's actually what guided me in the last few miles. There's a gravel road off a service road, and then a few crooked, unpaved paths off of that. The trail markers were all bent, broken, or faded. In the end, I had to follow my nose. I set up my junior scout tent in the fading twilight. Mine was the only one there. I had the place all to myself. After a quick meal of apples pilfered from a previous campground, I did my usual travel log spiel to my video camera by lantern light before turning in. I'm not sure how long I slept. I know I checked the time, but I'll be damned if I can recall what it was. Something had disturbed my well-earned beauty rest, but I was too groggy to remember what it had been. I sat in a stupor, too alert to fall back asleep, but too sleepy to be totally awake. Something brushed the side of my tent, and suddenly I was more awake than I'd ever been. I had done plenty of camping by that point. I was familiar with the sounds of the usual nighttime critters, from raccoons to coyotes. Nothing had ever bothered me in my tent before. Just snuffled around camp before wandering off and leaving me be. From the sound of the footsteps, it was walking on two legs. That was a first. My mind immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. Bear. There's a lot of conflicting information out there about how to deal with bears, and a lot of it depends on the type of bear. Sitting there in the dark with my heart beating in my throat, I had no way of telling which species I was dealing with. Shout out or play dead. I was 30 yards from a sturdy cement block outhouse that might be better shelter. As quietly as I dared, I slipped my boots on and got ready to dash. The tent zipper seemed impossibly loud in the night as I worked it open centimeter by centimeter. I moved agonizingly slow. Once outside, I craned my neck around to see if the bear, if that's what it was between me and the outhouse. With the incredible illumination of the Milky Way, I could see the campground clearly all the way to the tree line. There was nothing out there. I could feel something watching me. It was like feeling an insect crawl along the back of my neck. There was no logical way for me to know something had its eyes on me, but out there in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, all alone, I couldn't dismiss it. Still on high alert, I crept along and tried not to crunch the gravel under my feet too loudly. The outhouse was still my best bet. The door was propped open by a stone, but inside there was a heavy-duty bolt lock. I would have to spend the night surrounded by the smell of not only horse, but also human poop, but I figured that was a fair trade for not getting mauled or eaten. My hand was on the latch when I heard the awful crunch of footsteps and gravel behind me. I kicked the stone propping the door open out of the way and slammed the heavy metal door shut, no longer caring how much noise I made. Whatever was on the other side had thumbs. Something tugged on the door as I struggled to bolt it shut. I won. but it was closed. There was a metal mesh along the top of the structure for ventilation. Through it, I heard the bellows of heavy breathing that matched my own. My phone was back in my tent because I'm an idiot. There was no way to tell time. The same stupid impulse that brought me out there in the first place kicked in. I had to know. Hello? Silence. Maybe they hadn't heard me, and then... Hello? I could have shit myself. I was in the right place for it. The voice was feminine like my own, and the sound of it was a kick to the gut. I couldn't even tell you why it made me so uneasy. The sensation was like when you're walking upstairs and you're expecting another step, but your foot comes down on empty space. I'm sorry. I thought I was alone, I said. I'm alone. Every syllable was jarring. I'm sorry. I freaked out. I didn't think there was anyone else here. Sorry, I'm here. You'd think now that I knew it was another camper. I would have opened the door, but I never did. Some deeply buried instinct kept me from taking my hand off the bolt. You scared the crap out of me. Are there more tent sites out in the trees or something? I'm something. There are more. Her words made me sick to my stomach. Again, I couldn't have even told you why. Only that they did. From her odd syntax, I guess English wasn't her first language. Do you need to go use the bathroom, because I'm going to be in here a while. That wasn't a lie. I wouldn't have opened that door if it was my own mother on the other side. You need to go. Her grasp of English was improving with every sentence. There was something weird about that. Look, I'm sorry if I scared you, but you started by creeping around in the dark. I won't come out. Can you go somewhere else? I'll be gone in the morning, I promise. I just wanted to sleep in peace. You need to be gone. I promise you, I creep in the dark. You won't be here in the morning. Fear cemented my mouth shut. The more I spoke, the more she did, and I didn't want to hear her voice anymore. I'm sure that makes me sound like a bigot or something, but I had the feeling I was feeding words to her, and the feeling was not pleasant. I felt like she was hungry for them. The same instinct that told me to keep quiet the first time kept me from running my dumb mouth off again. I was either dealing with someone who was not mentally well or with something else entirely. There was a threat in her words, or the way she spoke them, and I had no doubt she would be able to carry out that threat. I kept my hands on the bolt while they cramped and the first rays of sun crept sluggishly through the mesh at the top of the walls of my shelter. It wasn't until the sun was strong enough to make me sweat in my self-imposed prison that I felt brave, stupid, enough to speak again. Hello? Are you still out there? Hello? Anyone? There was no answer, which was the best outcome I could hope for. I opened the door. My tent was untouched, at least from a distance. The oppressive feeling of being watched had dissipated. I dressed and broke down camp in record time. My moped cranked to life, but it wasn't until I went to put my helmet on that I saw the footprint. I'd kicked that rock pretty far. It was close to my bike. Naturally, I went over to it. I had to know. In a clear outline of fresh mud, there was a single print on the smooth gray of the stone. Not human, but a hoof like that of an unshod horse or goat. It was so fresh, so vivid. It hadn't been there last night when I used the bathroom before I'd gone to bed. In the soft mud, in front of the outhouse door, was more of the same, some of them on top of my own boot prints. If you want to go looking for whatever the hell it was, be my guest. Just be careful with your words out there, because I figured out what was wrong with that voice when I watched the playback of my travelogue video. It was my own. Story number 2. I'm not saddened by the recent passing of my grandfather. Really, I'm compelled to share the way I knew him best. I would not be here today if not for him. The entity came for me when I was 8 years old and There was no way I would have survived if anyone else had been driving. My grandfather and I were on a fishing trip that day. My dad had intended to join us, but something had come up, so it was just the two of us for the first time. I was a little awkward around my grandfather because I'd never actually been alone with him. I had always watched others interact with him, but had little to say myself because I was only 8. I was also in awe of how he was to my dad, the way my dad was to me, namely a voice of authority. When my grandfather told me about the different types of fish and what baits to use, I listened like it was the most important thing in the world. It turned out to be a good thing that I took his words so seriously. That acceptance would later save my life. It began very innocuously. As we walked through a small gorge to get back to the car from the prime fishing spot, I could hear my grandfather's voice echo from the high rock walls. While he packed things into the car, I had several minutes to wander around, and I used them to run back to that area and shout. Strangely, my yell echoed only feebly once, and then not at all. Scream as I might, I heard no reflection of the noise. I was too young at the time to really understand how impossible that was. I just assumed I was yelling wrong somehow, or that my grandfather had a special grown-up timbre that allowed his voice to echo while mine just dropped off. Still, it bothered me, and I eventually brought it up on the drive back. Everything about that moment became seared into my memory. It was 3:22 in the afternoon by the clock in the car's dashboard. The sky was mostly clear with traces of white, and my grandfather's eyes were wide orbs of alarm turned upon me while his white knuckles tightened around the wheel. "What did you say, boy?" I asked. "How I can echo like you?" I told him, suddenly afraid that I'd done something wrong. I yelled, and I couldn't echo. His face was normally crisscrossed with little lines that ran their way along relaxed, droopy skin. At that moment, his forehead and cheeks tightened to smoothness, and he scanned left and right rapidly. He didn't seem to find what he was looking for through the windows, but he did not seem reassured. "Here." He leaned over and opened the glove box in front of me to pull out a bag of jelly beans. I smiled for a moment, but he was not giving them to me as a gift the way he intended. "Eat them all." I held the bag in my hands. It seemed a massive feast. If I'd been left to my own devices, I might have eaten them all eventually, but not all at once. "Why?" "Eat them all, boy," he said gruffly, his tone broking no argument. I began stuffing the jelly beans in my mouth. He looked down and around, then at the back seat, then at his travel thermos and the cup holder between us. He thrust it into my hands to join the spilling bag of jelly beans. "Drink this, all of it." "I'm not allowed to have coffee," I told him. "Mom," he cut me off. "Your mother will understand. Drink it. I know it tastes bad, but down it all." His gaze refocused on something beyond me, and I turned my head to my window to see the forested hills rolling by at various apparent speeds based on their distance. The furthest hills out on the horizon hardly seemed to be moving at all, but I thought I saw a tiny little speck atop one. My grandfather gripped my shoulder with one hand. "Drink, boy, drink, and eat those jelly beans. You need the sugar and the caffeine. It's going to try to make you fall asleep. Don't let it." To say I was scared then would be an understatement. No part of me thought this was a prank of some sort. He was too reserved and austere a man for that. The coffee tasted horrible, but I gulped it down until none was left. After that, I began swallowing jelly beans whole until they were all gone. I looked to my right. The speck in the distance was still out there, but now one range of hill closer. It was still tiny, but now held movement akin to something waving back and forth. I looked to my grandfather in askance, but in turn looked away from the thing in the distance to focus on my face. He breathed in through his nose and turned forward, determined in a way I'd never seen him. His leg moved, and the car began to accelerate. We'd already been going the speed limit on the empty highway. The sugar, caffeine, and fear began to have an effect on me. I remember my cheeks and forehead warming and my hands growing clammy. I asked, What's going on? I'm scared. Be scared, he breathed, his eyes on the road as he continued to hit the gas. I could see the needle passing 80. That'll help keep you awake. This thing, this godforsaken thing, it came for your grandmother. And it started the same way. Just before a long drive, we noticed her voice stopped echoing. His face contorted into a furious mask. But cars are a lot better now than they were back then. I won't let it get you. My back began forcibly pressing into my seat as he put the gas to the floor. I watched the needle pass 90 and then I looked out the window again. It was even closer, now visible as a silhouette of a man running up hills, between trees and over boulders, parallel to us. It's still out there. My grandfather grunted angrily and audibly slammed his foot down. I held onto my armrest and the door handle in terror as our car topped 100 miles an hour and began to shake. It felt like we were in a barely controlled projectile, far beyond any limit of safety, and I was terrified the highway would suddenly stop being empty and we would smash into a car or truck ahead. But even though that overwhelming fear and adrenaline, a chill tiredness, began seeping up my spine, my eyes began to feel heavy, and I blurrily looked to my right. The shock woke me back up. It was on the gravel shoulder of the highway now, completely visible as a black humanoid silhouette running at incredible speed alongside our car. In that moving pitch darkness, I could see lit pinpoints that made it feel as if I was gazing into the night itself. The afternoon sun burned in the sky above and behind it, with no effect. Staring as a blurred feet began to pelt across the painted line at the edge of the road, I felt sleepy again. It was running parallel to us, but drawing ever closer. "Wake up!" my grandfather screamed, risking one hand off the wheel at 110 miles an hour. "Shake my shoulder. It's trying to drain the life out of you. Wake up!" He jerked the car one lane to the left, and still pressed into my seat by the acceleration. I stared down at the hypnotic dashes in the middle of the road. Bit by bit, black feet began landing between each dash, keeping pace with us. I remember the car shaking violently around me the way I imagined a space shuttle lifting off around its astronauts. I know now we were crossing 120 and nearing the most the car could offer, but at the time I was caught in watching the hypnotic dashes and stars in those void legs moving rapidly back and forth as it ran right up alongside the car and reached down with one hand to open the door. Wind blasted around me as the gale force of 120 miles an hour winds tore at my clothing and hair. Waking up halfway, I screamed, and my grandfather jerked the car to the left again, as much as he could without going off the road. It didn't matter. The running silhouette held the door open against the wind with its star-filled arms and began preparing to leap into the car with us. The other arm gripped my neck, and the cold that it brought cannot be described with mere words. The closest I can come to say is that the vast speeds and forces of an antithesis cosmos hated me. Somewhere ice and anti-life were the rule, moving through emptiness at absurd velocities, and this thing was some small part of that undead will. But it was not fully here. It could only interact with us in certain windows. That's what I believe now. My grandfather gave the only shout of fear I would ever hear from him. As the car seemed to be shaking apart around us, I looked left at the speedometer, found the needle to be unreadably far out into the red, and felt the heavy blanket of sleep fall over me as a silhouette grasped repeatedly but failed to reach me. The door slammed shut, cutting off the wind. Inch by inch, we began pulling away. It ran furiously alongside, but the entity was just a tiny bit too slow. Between one moment and the next, realizing it couldn't get us, it vanished. We'd escaped it. I woke in a hospital several days later. My grandfather told nobody the real story, of course, but the doctors had plenty of diversion. Somehow I'd been drained of a number of vital electrolytes, salts, and so on, and they chalked my coma up to some sort of severe dietary imbalance. But I knew the truth. And I've made sure to tell the people I care about the small piece of advice that my grandfather taught me. I don't care if it makes sense to you. Just listen. It's out there, still in the open lands of the Midwest, and it's probably always been there. It was just never a problem before we started bringing great speeds into our daily lives. People die every day by falling asleep at the wheel, and I know for certain that not all of those incidents are innocent. If your voice stops echoing, cancel your road trip. It's waiting for you. Story number 3. Ever start dating someone where everything is going a little too well, so you start worrying for no reason whatsoever? No one could be that perfect, and even if they were, then there's no way they would look twice at you. The only logical explanation is that they aren't as perfect as they pretend to be, which leaves you playing detective trying to figure out the catch. Maybe all those little quirks that you find adorable now are going to drive you crazy in a few months. Maybe she even has a dark secret, hard drugs, or hating dogs, or that one time she killed a man with a stiletto heel in a fit of passionate rage. There's an easy solution if you want to find out who someone really is. Take a long-ass road trip with them. If you're still together by the end, then it was meant to be. My girlfriend, I'll call her Marie, not her real name, somehow thought it was a good idea to drive 1,000 miles together across the country after we'd been dating for 2 months. We're both pretty busy with work and didn't get to spend too much time together, so naturally being locked up in a prison cell on wheels for 2 days was going to be an improvement. First 100 miles, so far so good. Holding hands, singing to the radio together, uncontrollable laughter when she found out I knew all the words to Skater Boy. Sue me, it's a catchy song. And if the road ended there and we turned around, we might have lived a long and happy life together. It was when we passed the hitchhiker that everything began to fall apart. Let's give him a ride, Marie said, squeezing my hand. We'll be on this road forever anyway. We don't even know where he's going, I told her. He's probably just going to rob us and steal our car. Which is true of everyone you don't know, and most of them you do, as far as I'm concerned. His clean-pressed suit didn't reassure me either. That just meant he'd successfully robbed someone before me, which actually made him even more dangerous. The guy didn't even have a sign or anything. He was just sitting by the freeway ramp, spastically waving his thumb like he was guiding an airplane to land. It was my turn to drive, and I just sailed right past. Marie and I started bickering after that. She thought I wasn't compassionate, and I thought she was reckless. It took about 10 minutes before she finally dropped it, although it wasn't because she'd conceded. Hey look, there's another one, sitting by the side of the road, waving his thumb like it was the end of the world. It wasn't another one, though. It was the same guy, I'm sure of it. Only this time he looked like he'd been out here for a few days. His suit was streaked with dirt, and his hair was greasy. There was a desperate strain in his face, like a proud man trying to conceal his embarrassment. It wasn't just my imagination either. Marie recognized him too. How do you think he got here so fast, she wondered. I don't know and I don't care, I said. This trip is supposed to be about us, so let's not get distracted. My car blew past him, and I stayed the course. We started arguing again, and even when we agreed to drop it, the argument just slithered into new topics. She hated my music. I hated how judgmental she was. I was controlling. She was picking fights over nothing. It kept getting worse until we saw something that shut both of us up real fast. The hitchhiker again. Another 20 miles down the road from where we'd seen him last. The bottom part of his shirt and jacket were ripped to shreds, and blood was soaking through a concealed stomach wound. He was stumbling along the side of the road, weaving erratically, wandering straight onto the highway at times before pitching off to the side. Marie could not believe that I didn't stop. I couldn't believe she still wanted me to. I was starting to feel really uneasy by this point, and the stress of our arguing was only making it worse. She kept yelling about he was hurt and needed help. She refused to even acknowledge how weird it was that he kept getting ahead of us. She almost caused an accident by grabbing my wheel when I refused to turn around. We drove for the next 50 miles in silence. I turned the radio back on, but she snapped it back off immediately. It wasn't until I pulled out for gas and we saw him again. Face down on the side of the road, shirt and jacket gone. Long, even bloody gashes from his shoulders to his ass, almost like bear claws or something. I stopped the car and parked behind him. Marie jumped out and knelt beside the body. She looked up at me with uncomprehending rage burning behind her eyes, like this was my fault somehow. "He's dead," she said, standing up. "Can I call this into the police, or is that too much of an inconvenience for you too?" I nodded, absolutely numb. I filled up on gas while she waited with the body until the police arrived. They asked us a few questions, but neither Marie nor I felt comfortable explaining that this wasn't the first time we'd seen him. They took our information and let us get back on the road after about 15 minutes. The car was silent for a long time after that. It was starting to get dark, and I kept suggesting places to spend the night, but Marie just shrugged and stared out the window. At the rate we were going, we'd be breaking up by the end of the trip, and I wanted to be over as soon as possible. I just kept driving long after the sun went down. Marie fell asleep around midnight, but I kept going. She was so beautiful like that, and everything was going so well before this. It was just so frustrating that such a random event that neither of us could predict would destroy us like this. By around 2 a.m., I was getting real tired, but I decided not to give up. Maybe if she woke up and we were already there, then she'd see how hard I worked for her. Maybe then we'd still have a chance to patch things up. I caressed her hand, and she returned to pressure. I flirted with the thought that everything was going to be okay, at least until she woke up and started screaming. There wasn't any safe shoulder to get off the highway, so I had no choice but to keep going. She shut up quick enough, but it was still about 10 seconds of hysterical breathing before she could explain what was going on. "Behind you, in the back seat." I glanced back, then back at the road, then back again. The hitchhiker was in the back seat, naked, filthy, covered with black blood and old wounds. His elbows rested on his knees as he leaned towards us, evidently still alive as he cocked his head to regard me curiously. "Get off the road," Marie started screaming again. "I can't! Get him out!" "Did you go back? What's he doing here?" "I don't know. Open the door or something." I slowed down gradually and put my flashers on to warn the car behind me. The hitchhiker reached around behind Marie and grabbed her by the throat. I slammed my fist into his arm and felt something give way under the soft rotting skin. When I lifted my hand, I could see a black bone from his forearm protruding straight through the skin. He didn't seem bothered in the least. She was crying as the dirty fingers dug into her throat, pushing through the skin like it was made out of dough. She was thrashing so hard that one of her flailing fists smashed straight through the window. I managed to safely stop the car, but there was nothing I could do to break the indomitable grip around her neck. I jumped out of the car and ran around to the back seat with the hitchhiker. Maybe if I had a clearer shot at him, I could drag him out. I flung open the door and lunged inside, falling face forward into an empty seat. I thought he'd already escaped somehow, and ripped open the passenger's side door. Marie was gone too. If it wasn't for the blood and the broken window, I would have thought I'd gone completely insane. I spent the next hour searching the surrounding area with my flashlight. They were both gone without a trace. I considered calling the police, but I realized that if I wasn't already a suspect after the first body was found, then I'd definitely be one now that I was soaked in blood and my girlfriend was the one to disappear. All I could do was get back on the road, drive home, and never tell another soul what happened. That was my plan. It wasn't good, but it's all I had. And I would have done it too if I hadn't just passed Marie standing by the side of the road, clean, healthy, waving her thumb enthusiastically in the air. That was a few miles back, but I stopped to write this because I don't know what to do from here. If I see her again, do I pick her up or just keep driving and hope for the best? Story number 4. My friends and I were traveling to visit a relative of mine in Austin. We had road tripped all the way from Missouri. At this point, we were kind of bouncing around to various towns, exploring the countryside. We had arrived in Texas a bit early and had time to kill. At one point, we stopped at a gas station near Glass, Texas. Never saw the town, but that's what the old paper map we were using said. We wanted to do things old school with the paper map, but I still use my phone half the time. The station was a place called Quickie Fix, and seemed perfectly average, just a little run down, but still colorful. I'm sure it would have seemed creepy at night, but during the day and with friends, it was nothing to be worried about. It was also safe to say that there was hardly anything around this place. Maybe some cows grazing, but no buildings, just more road and fields in the distance. My friends, a couple of guys named Tim and Corey, wanted to load up on snacks, and I needed to use the bathroom. The inside of the station was also average. Fluorescent lights beating down on everything, beverages and refrigerators. The woman behind the counter was a bit off-putting. She was incredibly overweight and didn't seem to respond to us walking in. She just kept staring ahead, at nothing in particular, enormous arms resting on the counter. While my friends perused the snack aisle, I tried to find the bathroom myself. After not spotting it easily, I resigned myself to talking to the woman. I asked her where the bathroom was, and she looked at me very suddenly. There was something off about the way her attention just snapped to me, as I had broken a spell. She slowly, almost robotically, handed me a key. "Round back," she said simply. I took the key, which felt heavy and wet. I chalked it up to her having sweaty hands. I held the key in my hand and told my friends I'd be right back. As I walked out the door, I glanced back inside. The woman had been watching me, as if she didn't want me running off with a key or something. She seemed to be scrutinizing me. Her eyes seemed so much more alert now that I had the key in my hand. I made my way around back, and I found a door with a little man on it. The men's room. It looked about as mucky as anything else in this gas station. Oddly enough, there wasn't a door nearby with a little woman on it. I thought it was odd. I guess it was a gender-neutral situation. I slid the key into the handle and pushed my way inside. The bathroom was dark. I tentatively groped for a light switch. I didn't want to touch much of anything in there, and when the lights flicked on, I noticed bugs crawling into the corners. Great, I thought. Can't wait to put my bare ass on the toilet in here. It was still relatively dark. One of the fluorescents was out, so the whole place seemed dim. There was a urinal and a single stall. Kind of creepy, but again, it was daytime and I wasn't all too concerned. There was an odd smell though, like fish or maybe just shit, like a putrid combination of the two. I opened the stall, and to my surprise, the toilet wasn't overflowing with vomit or a truck of shit. It was actually decently clean, still relatively white porcelain. There was toilet paper, and so I naturally covered as much as I could before sitting down. At this point, I really needed to go, which is probably why I didn't notice the writing on the wall until I had my pants down and was taking care of my business. On the right wall, there was what looked like writing. It had been scratched onto the wall, messily and seemingly hastily. I am transcribing what I found exactly as I found it. I also made my own mental notes as I was reading it. The message covered nearly the entire right side of the stall. It read as follows. "Don't look up. I am on the ceiling. It is too late to go. Don't go. I promise. I will be soft with you until I am finished. And so don't look up. I am angry." It could also have read hungry. "I don't want you to be." There was an illegible word. "It has been too long." This next line was completely incomprehensible. "Good. Keep reading. Don't look up. Keep reading. Don't look up. Don't look up yet. Keep reading." At this point, I realized what I had gotten myself into. Everything in my body told me to look up, that this was silly, but I just couldn't do it. "I don't want you to see me. I don't want you to leave it. It's been so long. So long. Please keep reading. Don't look up." There was more legible writing. It looked as if the writing was scratched into the wall by desperate human nails. I was also starting to panic a bit and was reading a lot faster. Okay, keep reading. Don't look up. I am coming down now. Don't look up. I am coming down now. Keep reading. I'm coming down now for you. Keep reading. Don't look up. Don't look up. I know it is hard, but I don't want you to see me. I'm almost down. I will feel you soon. Pretty sure it said feel your skin, your hair. So soft. I am coming down for you. Don't look up. Don't look up. Don't look up. Don't leave. I need it. Don't look up. I am coming down. Don't look up. Almost there. I can almost touch you. Don't look up. I'm so close. Don't look up. So close. Don't look up. 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 Look up. That was all there was. It ended with scratches. I couldn't quite make out. My heart was racing as I quickly pulled my pants up, didn't even finish going to the bathroom, and got the fuck out of there. I didn't look up. I fucking couldn't. But the whole time I felt the hairs on the top of my head tingling, my senses on end. A part of me fully expected to feel something when I stood up from the toilet. I burst out of that bathroom back into the light. I was never happier to see sunlight. I went straight to the car. I texted my friends that I wanted to leave fast. Then I realized I still had the key in my hand. I decided I'd keep it. There was no way I wanted to see that woman in there again. No way I wanted to see that blank expression. I wanted to vanquish this place from my memory. When we left, I told my friends about the message. But not in a way that implied I believed it. Just thought it was kind of cool and creepy, I said. But I felt truly afraid. I felt as if I just barely escaped something horrible. I felt the key in my pocket. As I told the story, a trophy of my survival, I thought to myself. I wish I'd gotten a picture to show you, but I was so paranoid. I left in a real hurry. I know deep down that this was probably a very, very effective scare prank. But who would do this at a gas station in the middle of nowhere? And there was that smell I couldn't quite place, like fish, but not quite right. This was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. But there is one more thing I didn't fully realize until after the fact. Something I haven't mentioned. Before I'd sat down to use the toilet, there was something on the other wall, the one opposite from the eerie message. A series of tallies, as if someone were keeping count. 4 tallies, and then a dash through to signify 5. 5 of those meant, if I counted right, there were 25 marks. I could have been 26. Whatever that means.